The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. It was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kīlauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Maunaloa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally got.
Aloha everyone, welcome to our Hawaiian Volcano Tracker. Today is Thursday, October 30th, 2025. Kīlauea Summit is in her pause following episode 35 and we're waiting episode 36. So we'll review that today and we'll have a special feature today where we'll reattempt to do the patterns of episodes 1 through 35 as we tried earlier this month and failed due to tech difficulties. So none of those today, huh, Dane? How are you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, just kind of feels like relax after last week and all of the, talking about Poiki and stuff like that. So it's good to be able to do a recap at this point to go through these episodes. I know we've recapped them individually before, but today it's a little bit more of the trends and the patterns behind them. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, how can we try to group so many of them now that they keep blurring together? For many of us have been following this for 11 months, almost 10 and a half months.
It seems like
How
it's
about you,
going to
Lou?
make it to the year. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah. Sorry, I didn't cut you off there. How about you, Lou? What did you notice this past week?
I don't know. I'm kind of like with Dane, we got a breath of time to catch our breath for a second for being so busy. And as I was working today, I realized, here we are, the end of the month, and we're almost to the end of the year. We've been doing this, December 23rd, 2024, and 200 plus day, 300 days we're at, I guess. This has been quite the year, but this has probably been the first week where it's, I don't know. I kind of took a breath this morning myself.
Yeah, it's a good time to reflect, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We'll do that in our back half of the episode.
All right.
So, as usual, Dane will lead discussion. Dane will lead discussion on the chat, collect some questions for us to discuss, perhaps. Although it's pretty quiet here, maybe those will come for our recap at the end there. And anything else you guys want to add before we get into it here?
No, I think that's it. Go ahead and do it.
All right, let's get our scenes switched up here and get ready for our summary. All right. Oh, one more thing. There it is. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Hawaiian Volcano Summary for October 30th, 2025. We are awaiting episode 36 of Kīlauea's ongoing summit eruption, with this past week highlighted by roughly alternating glow between the north and south vents, which you can see here that we've cropped from the V1 camera. It's just in nighttime views. And if we look at the crater as a whole over this time frame, this is the thermal camera, the F1. You see that much of the crater floor is still showing spots of heat, but not much movement within the past week, with all the main heat signature focused right around the vent area right there. And corresponding to this roughly alternating glow from the north and south vents, we're seeing the seismic tremor, which is also showing the signals of this gas pistoning cycle. And you can see here the last 48 hours where these cycles were more common yesterday, and by this morning seem to have decreased in frequency and amplitude as well. So slightly changing patterns, but we're still in the middle of episode 35's pause, following 35, with the USGS currently suggesting a likely window for 36 between November 5th and 10th, with November 6th through 9th most probable right there. And this is based on the inflation rate. Here's the tilt for the volcano from Uekahuna at the summit, shown in blue, the component towards the inflation center of the volcano. And so here you see the drop of episode 35 and the reinflation of the volcano following episode 36. But even though the threshold that we've reached before an episode onset has been variable, we're still well below that in our recovery thus far. And that's why the USGS is still saying we're another week or so out, plus or minus a few days. So that is the tilt. Here's a live view from the V1 camera into Kīlauea summit. And there you see the north vent in the foreground, fuming a little less than the south vent in the background, which has had this thicker pad of fume. And the fume is our most concerning hazard at this point in time, since most of the all the lava and the other effects are contained within the summit crater. Occasionally the tephra flies out as well into the highway, as we saw last week. But really it's the gas we're worried about. And so in that context, our most recent satellite view is showing recent Kona winds bringing some of that fume into the Hilo area yesterday. But if we look at our VOG dashboard from the VMAP project, we can see that our trade winds are going to be returning, but also the winds are still light enough to cause some of this VOG to drift into the Saddle area and north over the next couple of days. Currently, our Citizen Science Monitor Network from Purple Air is showing mostly green conditions with a few getting in the yellow area, borderline areas, and the typical zones that we see it where the log gets caught on upper slopes of Kona, South Kona. One thing to note is that we are still on the 12th day of this ongoing pause. The last 4 long ones have been in the range of 16 days. And so if we do reach another 7 days, that will be the record longest pause of the eruption thus far. Looking at earthquakes for the past week, it's fairly quiet. We do see the continuing pattern of earthquakes underneath the summit, reflecting pressurization of the magma recharge, as well as this population in the south flank, which as always has reflected this mobile side of the volcano that moves as the interior swells and pushes it, and also as gravity pulls it downwards. So looking at the earthquake counts for the last year, we're still right around that low average that we've established as a new normal ever since this eruption began late last year. And other signals are similar as well. We're seeing the continued expansion of the crater north and south across Kīlauea caldera, 10 centimeters thus far since episode 35. Typical, these very long stretching periods between episodes, after which it contracts very quickly as the fountains relieve much of that pressure. All this is contained in a summit region. Here is a zoom in to the last month of tilt, both at the summit in blue, but also at Pu'o'o on the East Rift Zone in green. And you can see that the green line is showing a mostly flat, but slight declining trend here. So reflecting those conditions reported by the USGS. Here's a map, the most recent map we have of the lava field within the summit crater of Halema'uma'u in Kaluapele at Kīlauea Summit. And all this has been the result of these past 10 plus months of lava filling. So we'll end our summary here by showing you guys a recap of all the episodes from the F1 camera, how the crater has been filling over these past 10 plus months. Camera was offline there briefly. You can join us in our full update for a recap of all these episodes through all the different cameras, time lapses, and eruption thus far. And that's our summary for this week. So let's switch over our title here and get into our hazard summary, look into the gases a little bit more. So here we have the V3 camera, and I've just clipped the daytime views, just so you can see mostly the wind direction is blowing trades, and all this gas is blowing right to left, except for when we come around the 27th, the wind seems to slacken and shift. We see some very brief, but a couple little pulses of the wind blowing back to the northeast. And that's what happened to be caught in that satellite image that we showed you in our summary just a minute ago. Here's the KP camera on the side of Maunaloa looking south. Let's pull us back to a week ago as well. There you see the fume coming out of the crater, hugging the ground over the Kau Desert, blowing southwest for the most part, until again the 27th, where for a couple I don't know, periods there, the wind blows it back towards the camera, and you see it obscure over here to the left a little bit more. And one last one will be the KP camera. Oh, sorry, that was the K2 camera from the Kahuna overlook. Yeah, and the KP camera on the side of Mauna Loa is this one. I misspoke there earlier. So here is a further away view from the side of Mauna Loa with that low to the ground plume. And then that change in wind direction was accompanied by a big rainstorm as well. So this camera further away is going to catch not only the wind change, but a bunch of water in its lens as that rainstorm comes through here. And then back to today, we can see we've resumed our pattern of the winds blowing close to the ground. So it just happens that in our Mounts project, capturing all the SO2 through satellite data, our most recent capture on the 29th, well, really the 28th in Hawaii here, is showing that cloud of gas north towards the Hilo area there, as you can see. If we go back in time, that's the day before, and before you can see very little gas signature detected on most of these frames until we get back to that period just following episode 35, which you see here, the 20th, 19th, and 18th, which were that big outpouring of gas along with episode 35, and then its dispersal that took a couple of days right there. And since then, quiet until you really see the Kona winds come in just a couple of days ago. So looking at the VMAP, VOG Measurement and Prediction Program, this is out of Manoa. We're looking at the VOG dashboard here. And if we do that, we can see the forecast, both for the raw SO2 volcanic gas that's emitted, which you see here for the start of this forecast period starts out going towards Kau, and then it does look like there are some periods of lighter winds where it does drift north here into the saddle area and possibly reaching upper areas of Hilo and north of it to Hamakua as well. So if we look at SO4, where you can actually react some of those SO2 with water vapor in the air and create some aerosol particles that show up in that particulate matter reading. You can see similar patterns, but sometimes a little further away. You can see how this stuff can linger, this Kona area there and uphill in South Kona as well. So that's all business as usual for those of us living here in Hawaii and been here for the past 10 months at least. It's definitely this lull between the big pulses. Nothing's falling on the highway this week. You know, it's just the regular background emission, but that emission is still quite high if you were to compare it to like an EPA standard of a factory, such that anyone who's living nearby who has sensitivities still has to take precautions as always, right? So all of that usual guidance still applies. Our current data coming in from the state, Hawaii air quality data here. Let's get this refreshed. Currently, this is all in the green, but I was looking a little earlier. There were some spots that were picking up some of the yellows as well. Here's Hilo. You see it popped into the yellow earlier today, but it doesn't seem like it was actually moving through areas between there and the volcano. So just to remind you, these readings are picking up all particulate matter, whether it's the gas particles that form from reaction out of the volcanic emissions, or it's dust, or it's ash from brush fire or forest fire or industrial pollution. All those things could contribute here. So presently all looking good, but that is our main hazard as usual, and that's why we spend so much time on that. Thankfully, there is no lava outside the crater impacting anyone's properties, right? Here is the state of Hawaii Department of Health, statewide SO2 and PM2.5 conditions. This is back online here. And you can see, once again, everything is in the green currently, but likewise, you can see they also picking up some of this higher values earlier in the day as well. Okay, so moving on to our purple error once again. Let's get some stuff out of the way here. You can see here in that Kona area, some of these stations are a little bit more yellow. Look at some of their history. You can see that currently it's down here, but we've peaked up close to this yellow threshold and exceeded a couple of times as well. So certainly gas is still coming out, it's drifting around, and it's adding to everything else out there that can affect people and the air quality. So closer to the national park, here's a national park website. They're still in a government shutdown. Thankfully, this page still updates. Let me scroll past all these alerts to show you the map with all the stations currently in green, not only around the summit, but also down in Kahuku and Kona, South Kona, down on the coast. And showing a 9-mile-an-hour wind, 4 meters per second, with a fairly concentrated plume blowing to the south-southwest here. That's the map view. We like to also click on this chart view because it gives us a window back 24 hours, and we can see if anywhere else, like here at Kahuku, when occasionally that strong wind happens to blow that plume and drag it across the sensor for about an hour here, it does register these quite high readings, right? Hazardous, 9:30 a.m., 9:45, 10, and so on, right through there, about an hour. But that was the only station that picked it up, as you can see here from the rest of the graphs. Right? So depending on where you are, just follow the guidance, use common sense and hunker down if you need to, especially if you're sensitive. Finally, here's our windy SO2 layer, looking at the whole global context of our little puff of gas, big puff of gas that looks little on a big Earth here. And since it's been a week and a half since our last episode, we haven't added to our volume of SO2 quite as fast, and so it's more dissipated than we've seen in previous weeks here. And not only that, zoom it out, you can see this big weather system here that's pulling some of this off of Hawaii and also likely causing our slack winds that we've had, some of that fog coming across Hilo. So that's the context of the gas here. And we'll move on to our visual observations. So we'll start that visual observations with the V1 camera. Here's day and nighttime view of the past week. So we're combining both the gas blowing off to the southwest mostly and the alternating glow at night here, so you can see it all in proper sequence. And there you saw that gas blow towards the camera a couple of times there, and then back to the previous pattern. But to focus a little more closely on this roughly alternating glow, you see it does seem to bounce back and forth, but there's plenty of times when they're both acting together, and there are some times where there's neither one is very strong as well either, right? So it's just a rough pattern matching observation here, and does seem to correspond to that tremor that we showed you on the seismograph earlier. From the V3, here's the nighttime views of the glow. You see the south event a little better rather than the north event here, but it just shows you this pulsing that's happening with a gas pistoning cycle as this lava is being pushed up and the gas releases, it drops back down and the glow disappears. And perhaps you notice here towards the end, it did seem to slow down a little bit. We'll play this again, which reflects that slowdown mentioned by the USGS in their most recent update, as well as in the tremor pattern we see in a seismograph that we showed up top. And let me put that back on screen here just so you can once again see what I'm talking about here, right? Whenever that gas is billowing out of that vent, it's basically vibrating against the conduit walls, and that's causing this little cigar-shaped signal that you see over and over and over again. So each one of these is one of these pulses, and for the last 48 hours, you can see they're happening. They're not exactly regular, right? But they happen, on some more or less period. That's every few minutes. And then by the last night and this morning, you can see that something has changed, and we're not getting quite as much of that action, right? It could just be like a bigger bubble or a bigger slug of degassed magma down there. Is going to take something. The reason we've seen this before is, this is in itself not any kind of tell for what the volcano is going to do next. It's just an observation of what's happening now. All right, so that was our summit cameras. We like to do this exercise from the KW camera, looking at just the noon view for every day of the past 10 days in this case. So a couple of days after the end of episode 35. And by and large, you don't see a lot happening here. I try to scan away from the vent first. I don't really see any movement in the ground anywhere else, apart from really this vent area right in here. So given that's the case, I'm going to zoom into that and show you guys, there are the first couple of days of this. There's still some of this slow movement, maybe not quite visible to the naked eye, minute by minute, right? But when you speed it up like this, you can see it. Some of this stuff flowing outwards. And then if you look closely, there's a sagging downwards of this whole mound, like all the way through here. All this area seems to be going just downwards, like losing gas and settling, compacting, maybe fusing a little bit together and compacting whatever void space is down in there. So that's really it. It's pretty quiet otherwise. That same view exercise from the east side of the crater, from the B1 camera. That vent action would be back in here. You can barely see it since it's further away and it's fewer pixels, of course, which is why we're using this to look at the east side. And on the east side, don't see any movement or change here at all. Just mostly we see the light reflecting differently depending on the weather at noon each of those days. So pretty quiet overall, pretty stable. And one final view, the F1 camera that we showed up top as well. Most of that action, the heat, all here around the vent, and everything else pretty cool and not really moving anywhere you can see it all. So I'll just look at the live views of the V3 camera here. You can see a better view of that billowing from, looks like the north vent's got a little bit more gas now, and the south vent's a little bit less. Let's go back to the V2 camera. It's from across the crater at Volcano House. So mostly you're seeing fume there. And the V1 camera here, where, yeah, you see from the back of this mound here, the main outpouring of gas. A couple other ones. Here's the F1 camera. Let's get this sized appropriately. most recent image here, or not quite, earlier this afternoon and right now. And the KW camera. Get this one current as well. And the B1 camera here finally too. The sunset coming in. So that's all I have live for you guys here, but I did have Lou, let's bring in Lou and have him talk about what his community actually caught.
Yeah,
as well.
definitely. I got two. As we were talking there, something popped up, and I'm gonna drop us back to the 27th. So what was that? Tuesday? Monday night,
Monday.
and it's the first we've seen from the vents in a while here. Let's go ahead and pull it up here. It's the hydrogen flames that were coming out. This was I couldn't resist with these. These were a pretty good example of them. We've seen these in the past, but this was a good shot that night. About 3:30 in the morning.
Oh yeah, look at that.
And we haven't had any since. It was just that night. I mean, there wasn't the update, but we looked pretty hard the last two nights. And if they were in there, they were down deep, and they weren't anything like this.
Right. This is the most photogenic of the bunch, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they didn't. We'll see that later. That they did mention that in the updates for most of the week that there were flames persistent in North Vent. But as you say, that's the best capture right there.
Yeah, and most of the night observations have pretty much been the alternating glow, north vent, south vent, with the south vent pretty much taking the lead and everything, kind of like we saw prior to episode 35. All right, and this morning, the highlight, we put this up on HVERI pages today, and this was the rock falls that happened this morning. The first one, which caught our eye, thank you to the night crew that messaged me on this one. And then right after that, a big old boulder chunked off of there. And then I dropped the spectros down on the bottom so you can see what it did down on the spectros. So the spectros are a little bit ahead because they would have been behind. I brought them out. It didn't all happen simultaneously like that. There's a little lag in there, but you get the idea. See that again.
Pretty epic. Yeah. So yeah, well, it's been a common thing we've seen. You know, when we saw when it was glowing in the inside at one point. Or it kind of depends how long it happened.
Yeah, and
after the episode ends. Yeah, go ahead.
In between this episode and the one that's coming and the one that we just finished up at 35, we saw some movement right after the episode had ended, but it's been relatively quiet. What was it, 15 and 16, 17? We really saw a lot of movement of the rock falls afterwards, day and night. Other than this has been pretty much the biggest one. I paused it right on that boulder. It's about to fall right now. This is a big chunk that came out of there. And somebody had brought up on a comment, had asked Philip, if you look up at the top, you can see some steam all the way up at the top where those originated. Can you see that up there at the top?
Yeah, barely. Yep.
Yeah, it's barely up there. You can see some right next to the H, and then all the way up to the top of that peak. Somebody had mentioned or asked if that had anything to do with the rock falling.
I mean, maybe, right? I mean, we know that whole area is all new fallout of Tephra, right? And it's hot on the inside, and so that heat comes out somewhere, and it usually comes out in discrete cracks rather than everywhere the same. It kind of focuses in particular areas of cracks, and the cracks are going to be the weak spots. And the weak spots is where rocks are more likely to fall if they're not stable. So, I mean, some way, yeah, related, but not like the steam came necessarily and pushed out the rock. It's kind of more symbiotic than that, we'll say, right?
Yeah. All right. So that's my observations over the week that have really stood out the most.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Lou.
Yep.
Thanks for bringing that into us. All right. So now let's switch over to our monitoring signals and recap some of these updates that Lou just referred to that are talking about the flames. So we'll pick it up on Friday last week, the day after our previous update, where the USGS is stating there are still roughly alternate periods of moderate to bright glow. And at that point, they noted secondary lava movement appears to have stopped, but it was probably moving so slow that you couldn't see it over a one-day update time frame. You have to look at the whole week and how much it's moving over that, like we just did on a previous time lapse. So early on, they had this forecast window of November 6th through 12th, and that's moved 5th through 11th, and we finally landed today on the 5th through the 10th. But so from Friday, we'll go to Saturday, where we note there on the 25th, they note the first time bright overnight with flames frequently observed from the north vent during bright glow. Right, so it's picked up on the camera a couple of days after that, most easily, but throughout the whole week, they basically repeat the same sentence, roughly alternating periods of moderate to bright glow with flames frequently observed from the north vent, and secondary lava flow movement after episode 35 appearing to have stopped. Really, the biggest change was today. Today's daily update from this morning, where they note that most importantly, inflation and tremor continues and glow continues. Another episode is probable. The model suggests likely forecast of 5th through 10th, with 6th through 9th most probable, kind of honing in on it a little bit more, that we're getting a little closer. So here they note a little bit differently. North and south vents had moderate to weak glow, which diminished progressively overnight. The alternating glow pattern between vents persisted, but became less distinct in the morning. The reduction in incandescent glow was accompanied by a reduction in the size of gas pistoning events observed in the seismic data that we showed you a bit already. And that's really the highlight of it there. I don't need to read the whole update. We're just waiting for more information to come, those days to pass, and that build up to continue, so we can hone in a little bit more on the window here. Although we've seen variability within that window too. Sometimes it comes early, sometimes it comes late. As I mentioned before, with a current length of a pause of 12.5 days, and if we add another 6, that puts us at 18. That would be longer than our longest of 16.5 so far. So maybe it'll do that, or maybe it'll come a couple days early and go on pay. Who knows? It's anyone's guess at this point. And that's where we stand on the text updates. I'm going to show you guys the latest INSAR images here from the Mounds project. So we have one released on the 25th from the previous 6 days, and we'll compare that to the one we showed you guys last week. So where are those? Here they are. Here's a one just released from the 25th, going back to the 19th. And we see this bullseye pattern, actually 2 of them, bigger one here with a center where we're used to seeing it in the middle of the crater, right there. And if we look at the progression towards the center of it, we're seeing blue to green. Blue to green is this direction. That's towards the radar. That's the ground rising up. And so that's an inflation signal that you see right here. Let's see if we can make that even a little bigger for you guys, since it's really that intersection that matters the most. The speckled areas are usually where you see very more chaotic fine scale movement. Often it's trees blowing in the wind. That's what's this vegetated area here to the east northeast. But here in the center, it's likely the lava flows on the crater floor are actually settling as well. So it's somewhat marking out where you're seeing the small scale movement of lava flows as well. Interestingly, if you look here, there's another big spot off to the side here. And if we look at this, it goes orange to pink to blue. And again, orange to pink and around to the side to blue is again inflation. So not quite as strong a signal as over here in the main part of the central summit, but we've seen this in the past as well. It seems to be like there's like an arm or some branch of this off in this direction that seems to inflate as well. It's like maybe an extra little holding area that can pressurize, maybe it's acting like a pressure tank for all we know to help pressurize the fountains that are coming out here. And there's a smaller spot right there in the middle that goes blue to red. Blue towards red actually looks like a deflation signal. So you can see like this, it's kind of an undulation. It's like some areas are rising while others are dropping, and the whole earth is adjusting to those moving pressures as they are now during the buildup. And then when the lava lets out, it'll move in a reverse direction in all these areas. And that's in addition to what we pointed out in the GPS before, that north and south across a crater is extending like an accordion, stretching out between these episodes and then contracting very quickly during them. So that's the INSAR from this past week. And for comparison, here's the one we got last week, where so there's the 19th back to the 13th. We still see the similar bullseye pattern. We happen to capture episode 35 in the middle of this, and since the deflation signal is so fast, it dominates here And that's what you see is this reverse color pattern where it goes blue to pink to red, blue to pink to red in that direction, deflation of the same central area. But most interesting is it's showing us that the main buildup of magma underground is focused right in here, right? So we're thinking of a magma chamber or reservoir network of bodies that together are the magmatic web, or however you think of it. It puts the most pressure on the ground above right here, all within the crater. So that's interesting, right? If we saw this moving elsewhere, that would tell us, okay, something's changing, which is why we're interested in the side over here. But mostly it's focused in the summit thus far. And that's our monitoring signals for this week. We'll jump over to earthquakes. Looking at the earthquake map, this is for the last week here. I have this set to be colored by depth. The blues deep and reds shallow. And so here you see the patterns. The blues are outside of the volcanic zones of Kīlauea and Maunaloa, are usually these settling earthquakes deep under the crust. So there they are under Mauna Kea. There's one under the Kona coast. Follows a bigger earthquake we had near there last week. And some down by Pahala, near that hotspot feeder zone that we think has a branch coming towards Kīlauea here. So zooming in to the most active shallow parts, we've talked about Kīlauea's south flank population. We've talked about its summit reinflating and causing some small earthquakes as well. The pressure is building a lot with these 2-week-long pauses plus. So we're seeing earthquakes ramp up towards the ends of those 2 weeks each time. Whereas earlier with our 1 week episodes, we weren't really seeing that build up quite as much or at all. And corresponding to that increased pressure manifesting through earthquakes at the summit, we're seeing similar on a flank of Maunaloa, east of the recent eruption site in 2022. In this area, that does seem to always flare up when these mountains are adjusting back and forth on each other, which happens when they are both inflating, which they are. Kīlauea in a more episodic fashion, Maunaloa more steady long-term. But still, yes, Kīlauea is building pressure quake over here, then it seems like we have more earthquakes flaring up over here as well. And there's another random one, but as earthquakes build on Maunaloa, we're going to see more and more all around. It's pretty quiet overall, actually, here from this view. We'll look at a different map here shortly. But moving on an island-wide scale to our map that's colored by time. So all these are, let's give you guys a key here, within the last week, except for within the last day, we have one here in the middle under Mauna Kea. The largest of these was a 3.3 offshore, southwest of the island, 25 miles deep. And all the other ones were less than 3. So the next one being this deep Waimea one, 15 miles down. We have a shallow Pahala one, 2.5, and everything else is 2.5 or below from that point on. So not much to highlight with that. So looking slightly more closely at Maunaloa, we're really awaiting the monthly update that comes out next week, and we'll have more from USGS or perhaps more of the same. But we can look at the signals that they provide online as well. For the last week, it's mostly these daily and weekly variations that you see. So we'll have to zoom out. Earthquakes have been all in a shallow zone and fairly sparse in our depth versus time plot. And so over time, it's happening once in a while and not in any big clusters or not in any big swarms or flurries or anything like that. On a month-long scale, here's our tilt meter. We do sometimes see these cycles where we have this, kind of longer-term shifts like this, but seems to be an extra couple little bumps in here, perhaps, even if you correct for that. So interesting to note that maybe there is a couple little small inflation pulses that are getting detected there at Maunaloa Summit. Hard to say exactly what this is and to take out the noise, but there might be something there, and something of this small magnitude we probably will not hear from USGS anything about. But as we know, the volcano is still filling with magma, still inflating, earthquakes at the summit on the flanks, and overall the tilt is rising. Earthquake rates are really quite low, right? You can see these occasional spikes that reach 10 per day, but that's really not a whole lot. Here's depth versus time once again for the last month. So you see these little clusters of events, but nothing super exciting, except to show that there's still a pulse there. It's still building up. Over the last year, you can see a little bit more of this pattern of summit events growing slightly here, but you see the average that hasn't changed a whole lot through there. It's just we've had some slightly higher peaks and maybe the little ramp up cycle here that doesn't seem to be lasting quite as much. So depth versus time, there you see it again, how we had maybe slightly more across a bigger range of depths, and then more recently it's been more in the shallows and a little bit more concentrated here over the last few months. So, but really it's all really small in magnitude compared to what we saw before the 2022 eruption. Here's a few months before that, and the years ahead of that, where all of that was much higher rates than we're seeing now. So I'm just showing you guys what the maps look like. Here's the last week, not a lot of events, but there they are near the summit and the flanks. Over the last month, you see them concentrating a little bit more near the summit. Over the last year, you see that as well there, under the summit, under the southeast flank, and adjustments elsewhere across the volcano too. So the summit there continues to rise. Oh, actually, this is extend north and south, and rise up and down as well. So that's Maunaloa, and a quick peek in to the summit from earlier this afternoon. All right, I'll pass it to you guys for our community corner.
Hey, I'm back. Oh,
I'm muted. There it is.
There it is.
There it is. But we are set up to do community corner. How you doing, man?
Nice work. All right. Well, let's go through this. There's something very interesting at the tail end. I don't know if you caught wind of it this last week, but there's a little something floating around the neighborhood. Let's go through it here. We know that the park is busy. We are a week away, most likely, from our next episode. So pay attention on the roads. It's a daytime shot of visitors walking around, but it looks like this at night as well. So be aware. Kīlauea Trail switchbacks have some construction on it. The Helena Poly Road and the Maunaloa Road, they're all still closed up. You can hike or bike, but you can't drive. And the Kahuku unit is closed. So try to get in the gates there. Monday is our beginning of the month siren test that's going on. Hawaii will conduct the monthly test of our statewide outdoor warning system on Monday, November 3rd at 11:45. Sirens will sound for 1 minute. At the same time, radio and TV broadcasters will air a test of the emergency alert system. If you hear the sirens at any other time other than the monthly test, check the Civil Defense website or reliable local news outlets for additional information. And we've had our own test recently because we've gone through a tsunami. So I think that I've been noticing a little bit more vigilance now to make everybody aware, go through, make sure the sirens are working. So it's important that if you have one in your neighborhood and it's not working, please contact Civil Defense.
Go back to one thing on that. So just want to make sure everybody's clear that even though you are reporting this to Civil Defense, the Hawaii County Civil Defense, the sirens are state. Repairs done on them are by the state. So while we're telling Civil Defense what's working, what's not, they're the ones that press the buttons to make it sound, or one of the people that can do so. But they have nothing to do with those towers being operational. That is all in the state, and it takes time, right? We were talking about the Ocean View siren that got destroyed recently, and everything that goes into replacing it, so to speak, and the timelines associated. And I think there's 2 technicians for the state.
Yeah.
On all the islands. It's crazy. So
it's a lot of sirens statewide.
Yeah. Just throwing that out there.
Yep. Good information. And here's something else from Civil Defense, Hawaii County. You can get the hazard map and the public alerts. You can go ahead and scan those QR codes. I blew them up a little bit. They do work. You can check them out or text 888-777 for all kinds of information there. Stay up to it. We're coming up on Kona low season. We out, Dane, officially out of hurricane season? We should be, huh?
Yeah, I think so. At this
right?
Late October. Yeah.
Yeah. So now
I think it's September 31st. I thought it had been done for a month now.
Yeah. So we just kind of prep now for the winter Kona low, the south swells coming in. And I picked up this as well. Hawaii County Civil Defense Agency has a podcast on the Leo TV. I put the link to this down in our description. Check it out. I watched a little bit of it today. It's actually pretty good. And it's about are you earthquake ready? If you missed the Great Hawaii Shakeout, you can still learn about earthquake safety tips with Civil Defense Personal Preparedness Podcast. So check that out. If you didn't know that the park was closed, it's not. Just the Kahuku unit. The park itself is open for viewing, as well as Volcano House. This is your source for water, for food, for information. So you can go check them out at the Volcano House. Lava viewing everywhere. I left this picture up from the last episode because it's so epic with the falls in the background, something Dane and I have been waiting for months. And
it didn't happen how I thought it would happen. I thought we were going to get a new crack up there. Not that the fountains would get so big that it would produce lava flows backflowing into the caldera. That's
right. Yeah.
Wasn't on the bingo card, so to speak.
Well, we got it. We got something. This was taken from the road walking out to Keanakekoi Overlook. So this wasn't even at an overlook. This was just on the road out there in bounds, not out of bounds. So you can view this volcano erupting all over the park, stay in bounds. If you're looking for parking, you can go to where the Welcome Center is up at KMC. There's parking all around there, whether it's behind the new HVO building being built or parking spaces throughout. You can park anywhere through there. They do have some bathrooms there. There's a picture of the KMC. And there's some viewing areas. I have not seen too many pictures from Waldron's Ledge this time around. I think I've seen them from everywhere else. Waldron's Ledge is all the way in the back by the Volcano House. Iki Trail, Devastation Trail, Keanakekoi, Waikahuna, Kīlauea Overlook, all the way down, steam vents. Still searching for somebody that's making their way over there. It's nice and quiet over there. It's one of my favorite spots. This is a shot from the Kīlauea Iki Overlook parking lot from my truck. And this was at about 1 a.m. and that eruption episode started about 8. It was still going pretty good. You could still hear it from there. And there's our friends drinking their water at the park. You got to stay hydrated. Bring your own water. Our friends here brought their own water bottle. Stay hydrated. Visitors to Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park should bring their own drinking water during their visit. The Kīlauea Visitor Center water station is currently unavailable due to renovations. A new bottle filling station will be installed at Waikahuna when it reopens in the coming months. In the meantime, bottled water can be purchased at Volcano House. Yes.
Okay, so there's a dog on another dog's back, and the dog that has the dog on its back is pouring water on the back of the dog that has a super straw, some kind of
He's got a super straw. His tongue is so powerful it just pulls the water out of the bottle. So but I really did appreciate the piggyback.
Do you roll it once and take what you get, or do you
sit
there and intentionally try and roll it
once
times to make it as goofy as possible?
Yep, I roll one time, and I saw the piggyback or the doggy back ride, and I'm like, winner. I could not resist. So bring your own water to the park. As well as safety is your responsibility. That is on the NPS website. Watch out for exposure up there, sun and wind and rain right now. We've had a week of weather up there. It's cooler, and it's 4,000 feet up at the summit. So temperatures can be down in the 50s. With the rain, it makes it even colder. Wear a hat, wear layers, wear closed-toed shoes. I am so surprised how many people I see out there in slippers. I don't know. I couldn't do it. There's some closure signs right there. The Helena Pauli, the Maunaloa Road, and the Kīlauea Iki switchbacks. They're open to walking, not to driving. That is a shot of the parking fiasco. The park made Hawaii News Now last week. I don't know if you saw a clip of that, about the chaos in the park, because there's just a lot of people that want to view. All those spaces right there parked on the grass are technically not supposed to be happening because there are rocks and ditches and wildlife. So pay attention, go slow. This is another shot that is fan favorite. What happens up there on the left-hand side is when it's busy, and on the right-hand side is an AI version of what could happen if you do not secure your valuables. Dane? No
I feel
comment
like
there?
you're just trolling with this one.
Yes, I am. Especially since the card doors all seem to come out backwards on these. Yeah,
Well,
Gemini.
you know,
Gemini.
it happens.
Here's something that's kind of floating around. It's kind of confirmed, unconfirmed. Season 2 of Untamed is going to be filmed in a Hawaiʻi National Park, and all fingers are pointing to our park. This could be happening in February. It'll be 6 episodes long, and rumor has it will likely be set on the Big Island, with volcanoes being the national park of choice. I don't have 100% confirmation on that, but all fingers are pointing.
Can you imagine the paperwork to get that approved? Oh my God.
Nope. You can't get a permit to park on the side of the road.
That's why they go to New Zealand and stuff to film Hawaii stuff.
It's
so difficult. And the park is even, oh man.
Right.
Good on them if they can pull it off.
Yeah.
You know, that'll be crazy.
Especially since they could be filming during 1-2 episodes of
during
eruption.
the shutdown. Who knows?
Yeah, pretty amazing. And there's a shot today of the Pohoiki boat ramp ish and our new levee and beach area. We have our cams down there at hveri.org/Pohoiki if you want to see what's going on during the day. Check out the surf, watch the erosion happen, or just see if it's is the park officially open yet, Dane? It's still not officially open.
I mean, I haven't heard anything, but it really threw a wrench in the plans because the county planned to do testing period to see what the boaters, thought of the ramp and the safety and stuff like that. So it was supposed to be closed for maybe another few weeks, but now it's like, what are we doing? Look how thick that beach is now.
Yeah, it's so thick, right? Yeah. And it's probably going to keep growing.
Yeah, it'll just return. Yep, that's what it feels like.
There you go. You guys can check that out. And we are in our fall fundraiser still. We're a little bit over $1,172 into our fundraiser, where our goal is $5,000. We're kicking off November here. Hopefully you guys can join us and throw us a few bucks and support our volcano education, our AI and digital resilience training, and our youth leadership programs. You can donate at hveri.org/donate. And you can also sign up if you want to be notified when there's an episode happening, or you'd like to be put on our email list for our newsletter. You can do that as well. You can go to hveri.org/subscribe. Check us out there. And there we go, Dane.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, but first thank County of Hawaii 5i Grant Program for funding this program, as well as our digital resilience and youth development programs. Their support helps make this possible, but really we rely on the viewers like you, the likes, the subscriptions, the shares, especially the shares. Everything really helps us continue this as well as expand to what we're doing. I know people say that the likes, every like and subscribe, but it really does help get this type of information out there if you appreciate it. So did have a couple, or at least one, Scott Ed came through with a $50 donation over on the website. So appreciate that support there. You can make super chats. They are not super chats because we're running a donation drive. So it goes through YouTube Giving, and we get 100% of those donations. So it's a really good way to be able to donate and make sure your donation has maximum impact.
Yep, it's the little holding hand symbol there next to the smiley face.
Yep. But yeah, I think that gets us through it, and I can go ahead and bring Phil back in. Thank you, Lou, for running through the community corner stuff, and yeah, we might see you at the back end of this whole thing.
You betcha.
Episodes. All right. Bye. And you're back. And there you go.
All right, thanks, Dan. Yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, happening in our community there. Yeah, for sure. I think Pohoiki, the sand is moving, right? My question still is, can we look at the back end and see, like, is it moving from the beach that's already there? Is it moving from one place to the other, or is it coming in from outside? That's really the most interesting question, and with long-term implications in my mind.
I mean, from just looking at it, through the time lapses, that's all we really have. It feels like that far side bank caved in and filled in the bay.
Right.
That was where the majority of the sediment and the rocks came from,
Right.
was the far bank, because it looks significantly reduced there.
Altered for sure. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, then in that case, like it's just a matter of they didn't scoop out enough. We knew it was going to move from what was left, and it was no evidence of anything new generated yet. But if there is, that's what I want to know. Is it coming from elsewhere? And nothing conclusive on that yet. And given that, some of the statements from our local politicians, doesn't seem quite accurate. I'll just leave it at that there, not really understanding the geology of the area there. So we'll all learn from this exercise, I am sure. All right. So
you
let's
ready?
move on to our special presentation this week. Yeah. I'm going to give it a shot here. Try this. I don't know how many times, 3 or 4 times. Seems like it's all good today.
I hope you got a rabbit's foot or something for this run.
I don't know. I'm just kind of hoping it's still in the brain here somewhere. We've ran through it so many times here, but the whole purpose of this is we've had 35 episodes now, and how can we try to group these in our minds to like make some sense of them, or imagine like what will happen when, because they're starting to blur together and kind of run together, and it has been 10 months and 10 months of anything. It's hard to keep separating each individual week or month even at that point in time. So we'll look at the patterns, episodes 1 to 35 for this Summit Eruption 2024-25. The background image here is that opening fissure from December 23rd, 2024 here, when we actually had lava flooding the whole crater floor, but also a fissure coming through that crater floor and eventually off screen to the right, where we'd focus on the 2 vents that we currently have here. And so I thought we would do this. This is not this is all preliminary. This is nothing final or scientifically vetted or anything like that, but let's just start off by how the public might look at this from the fountain heights and how they actually express themselves here. So in that sense, my proposal here is that we have 4 different groupings here. I'm calling them acts. So like our first act, our second act, third act, and the fourth act here. The first one, you can see that the fountain height, that was really that opening phase where we had that initial long fissure. We're eventually going to end up with 2 dominant vents. And it's that whole process of establishing the system, right? And under much of our previous experience with some of the eruptions in the last 5 years or so, we only saw this first phase and that was it. We never had anything further that became episodic. We only saw like one big burst and a kind of gradual decline from there, like sometimes in some pulses. So looking at the second act here, we can actually see once we have the 2 vents focused, we see the steady growth of fountain heights, right, from 200-ish feet to 400-ish feet to 600, and then we actually reach our first official high fountains of 1,000 feet, being our arbitrary standard there. And what happens after that is episodes 17 and 18. It's hard to really draw hard lines between these. Sometimes these transitions are more gradual, but just for the purposes of talking through this here, we've drawn a line between 17 and 18 here. 17 was the one where it seemed to reset itself, where the fountain heights were really low. It lasted quite a bit longer than before. And then from there, we see this pattern of it. 18 was kind of a hybrid in between those 2 there, but then it seems to climb back up. And after that, we once again reach our high fountains, but like a second group of peaks here, right? And these were the high fountains of episodes. What's that one there? 22, 23, 24, all the way through 28 here. And so then what happens for our fourth act is we're not really reducing the amount of lava coming out. We're actually just changing the geometry of the shape of it, right? So we have here our fountain heights low, but here's when they actually became inclined, and we're shooting off to the side at 45 or 60-degree angles. So fountain heights are not quite so high, but they're wiggling their way to eventually reach our record high here on episode 34 and 35 here. I guess this graph did not make it to this graph here. But yeah, these high fountains right over here. So we'll lay it out in text here for you guys to see and to have it on record. That first act, episodes 1 through 4, that opening burst flooding the crater, evolution to double vents. The second act, 5 through 17, establishing that repeating pattern, that episodic pattern, growing our fountains to the first highs. The third act here, 18 through 28, and again, arbitrary divisions here in some places. Our first reset and recovery of that pattern, escalation to our second high fountains. And Act 4, where we do have changes in the fountain heights, but those are really due to changes at the vents, where really it's a hybrid pattern because the fountain heights might be lower, but the volume coming out is still quite high. And that eventually builds us to the 34 and 35, these third highs that we've experienced of fountains here of this 10+ month eruption. So for fountain durations, let's look at how these acts divide some of this other data. For duration, you can see that the first act here was the one that had that opening phase, the longest duration. So it seems like that fits that fairly well. The second one has a little bit more variability, and you can see that towards the third and fourth, we're really dropping down quite a lot for as far as our fountain, how long they're actually lasting, right? You know, we went from having them go on for over a week to going on for about a day to going on for maybe 12 hours-ish, and now we're down to somewhere in the 6 to 8 range in the most recent couple here. So that is actually a zoomed out view with this really tall fountain. So if we zoom in to try to see more detail of these ones over here, and that's what we're doing right here. These ones are off the scale, cut off the top, but here you see that greater variability, where we even had a 1.5 day long eruption here for episode 17 there in that second act. And then coming back down and more variability coming in through here, just so you see how that falls out. Don't need to dive and overanalyze it too much here. Looking at the pause lengths, you can see that we kind of grew to a long pause after episode 3. And there is our reset coming to episode for Act 2 here. You can see that overall these generally become longer, but overall shorter in 2 than 3, and 4 really setting a new pattern of highs here at the end. And our most recent data after 35, we put us somewhere in a range of here right now, but this is going to keep growing over the next week or so until we actually have that onset, whenever that may be, with a current expectation from the USGS that it ends up here, actually all the way down to there. Episode volumes, how does this pan out? The first act had high volumes because it was that initial fissure opening phase. Then when we actually establish our 2 vents, that volume goes down. And there is some variability, but it's all in this range of up to around 5 million cubic meters or so. That's this line right here. As a more or less maximum, 5, maybe 6 in there. And after a reset of episode, and you see they're kind of bouncing all over the place. After 17, 18 has a low volume, but from there it seems to climb upwards through Act 3 and Act 4, all the way actually to our highs here most recently. Always there's some variability in there, but that's the overall pattern that you see, right? And maybe justifying some of these divisions and some areas, bringing up why maybe they're not the best fit, but that's what we're trying to figure out here. Discharge rates. Now we're actually looking at not just how much lava came out, but over what amount of time. So early on, that first fissure that opened up, as is typical, has a highest rate. We often see that pattern of eruption where we have this exponential decline, and that's usually it tails off, and that's the end of that. And what was different is after episode 4, we see here clearly the discharge rate starting to climb back up. That's when we believe there must have been some new injection of magma from that deeper cement reservoir. So some pathway to resupply this still active, shallower system, and turn this eruption episodic, right, and keep it going for as long as we've had it going now. So there you see that kind of gradual increasing more during 2 and 3. It is increasing with some variability as well. And 4, really, we could divide this line somewhere else, because 35 and 34 are their own population now, apart from everyone else, with their very high rates. So we'll see, maybe if I were to redo this in a few months, I might draw the line over here instead, or this might become Act 5, or maybe I'll change, who knows. But there is some emerging differences here within this most recent episodes as well. But there is a pattern of discharge rates coming up. And to look at how this looks on a tilt, here is that tilt for the whole last 10 months. that first opening phase, where we're really coming down fairly quickly. Here we're establishing our dominant vents, and you can see this repeating pattern. It's tighter and smaller. Here's our reset, 17, 18. It becomes a little bit more regular with this tighter cluster, but otherwise getting a little bit more regular. And then by 4, you start seeing this pattern extend and deepen. We're having longer episodes with more lava coming out, with longer pauses, and short episodes with longer pauses in between. So that's how that looks there. And throughout all this, the GPS extending the crater north and south. Prior to our current eruption, very steadily just getting stretched further and further apart until that initial first break. And then since then, episodic recharge of it expanding again and dropping down, following that same sawtooth pattern as the tilt. So as far as that, you can see that this initial first act had this expected range here. And the second one, it seems to become a little more established, but there's a little bit noisy in there. By the third, it seems to start stepping up. Right? If you look at this overall window, it's kind of in here, but then we start to see it actually coming up here and ultimately widening, contracting more and expanding more with each opening and closing of this accordion, as I keep referring to it at the summit. So that's how it all looks. And so looking a little bit more detail, let's look at the time lapses as our window into how this all looks and how we've experienced this. So Act 1, episodes 1 to 4, where the opening burst floods the crater, and we have an evolution to the double vents. Okay, so let's play that first compilation. This is going to be the summit cameras, starting with the S2 camera. We're just going to go through all the episodes, cutting out the lag time in between them, the pauses. So you can see the evolution of the vents here in this first phase, right? From our initial fissure, that initial burst of flood. Here we see our 2 vents getting established, episode 3. Camera shifts, but there we are. They start oozing out. We start having this precursory flows, building up to more effusion. Episode 3 was the one that lasted over a week. You see the cones start to actually build their initial shapes. Chunks of them are rafting away in the flood. Then we have that pause, overturning. Here's episode 4. And by now, we know what to expect moving forward, right? So that's the S2 camera. We'll cycle through as well the V1 camera, the initial view where we had that tree in a way to start. We saw the fissures from here originally, but we're looking at the vent chunks falling off and moving around. Then those flows, right? And this is all before they actually move this camera to get a better view of the site, right? So we'll see that shift coming up probably in the next act here, where right there, episode 3, the tree's not in the way anymore. We see those vents growing, moving, rafting outwards across this growing flow field, and glow at night happening from the vents as well too. So that's the V1 camera. That's the one that was actually in place for this initial act, right? We did not have early on the V2 and V3 cameras, if you recall. It's been that long. It was only the V1 and the S2 at that point in time. We did have other cameras looking into the crater. We'll start with a B1 camera. This is looking at that filling phase of the crater, that first big flood that filled most of the crater. You can still see these cones from the September 2023 summit eruption that will eventually all get buried in lava. You can see lava is focusing on this far back southwest sector of the crater. And as the floods get bigger, they progress across the crater further and further to the east. But really, during that first act, it was that first burst and flood out. But here you start seeing, by the end of episode 4, some of those ooze of flows on the side. We did have the B2 camera also in place to see that first initial flood and a crater, the flows moving across the crater here. And we're maybe halfway in the center of that southern edge there. So these flows are coming much closer to the camera, even if they're not marching away across the full caldera here. So you see that, and the flow is coming across. And you also see the crater floor bulging from injections of lava from below as well. Not quite as obvious yet, but you'll see this coming up. And it's a little post there at the end of episode 3, but it becomes more obvious in the later phases and episodes of the eruption as well. So that's the B2. There it is, some ooze of flows coming off the inside of that lava flow there. And now we'll move to the KW camera. where that initial burst comes out from the right. You see that second burst reaches a similar extent. Remember, this far side of the crater is pretty big also. It just looks small from this perspective. It's a little bit distorted. Episode 3 with those first initial precursory small stage flows. This is the one that lasted a week at a lower output rate, and they did march across the crater floor over the course of that week and ended up covering much of that area all through there. Here's episode 4. KW camera once again. You can start seeing the perch ponds building near the vent, and this is going to end up being this higher area of the caldera. So same view from thermal F1 camera. A little bit faster through the episodes. You can see that slower onset of episode 3, marching across the crater there. And shutting off, some overturning briefly, and here bursts out number 4. Some ooze-up flows coming up for the first time along that back sector right over there. Let's see, restart differently. Ooze-up flows here in the background. Because of that initial earlier burst of lava that came as far as there, and now we're seeing big flows and pushing, and we're seeing that there's clearly a lag between the flow being placed and that liquid hardening. The liquid is not hardening very fast in the interior. It's once again our somewhat of a jelly donut or pancake stack or waterbed analogy here that we've used in the past. Okay, so that will cover that's our first group. How I think of the first group is that initial opening phase, establishing the couple vents. After that, wait, hold on, got the wrong one here. Hold on, something I got the wrong.
Well, you're thinking, did you just refer to the thermal camera as a jelly donut? Did I hear that right?
I referred to the stacks of lava on the floor as a jelly donut, right? This is back to our joke from 2018, huh?
This is an AI challenge for you to create an envisionment of the summit as a caldera or as a jelly donut.
As a jelly donut. I'm on.
You know how everybody makes everything a cake. You know, like the couch is a cake. You need to make everything a jelly donut.
Jelly donut. All right. Sorry, Phil. Thank you.
All right. There we go. There's the right slide, episode 2, or Act 2, episodes 5 through 17. So now we're establishing a repeating pattern, growing the fountains to our first official high fountains, right? Before this, we were saying, it's fountaining. Is it really high fountaining by the traditional definition? So here is from the summit cameras, episodes 5 through 17, starting with S2. So here we see those shorter bursts now of lava flooding the crater floor, mostly in the southwest area. We're really zoomed in on the vents at this point, focusing on that. These are the vents growing with each burst. Some flows coming off the backside, right? And the vents are right against the crater wall at this point in time. And as a crater fills and they evolve, they grow up, and there's a little bit more separation that occurs. And eventually we'll see this whole back wall plastered in lava in our later episodes, later acts here. Moving through, there is those high fountains coming on towards the end of the sequence, where we start seeing the peaks of them reach the height of the crater wall and exceed it, until we get to 17, where we actually have that reset and reduction in the fountain heights and longer term. So there it is. High fountain 16, 17 coming on a little bit slower here. Not reaching quite so high, and that's what we refer to as that reset of the fountain heights to give us some separation. So switching cameras now to the V1. From that point of view, you see a lot of spattering from that near north vent. In this early set of episodes, really through the first 3 acts, we're seeing alternation between which is a dominant vent. Quite often they both go off, but as we get into this established pattern, it seems like one becomes higher than the other, and when one goes up, it somewhat robs the other one of its juice there, of its energy. And there we go, fountains growing higher from the V1 camera. This one zooms in and out, of course, but you do see how we're having movement of the cone growth through this entire time, even back to here as well. We start seeing more of these precursory overflows before the main fountain phase. Right? And that was 14 and 15 when we really were initially impressed by how high those fountains were, and of course that's continued By 15, though, you can start seeing all this stuff flying towards the camera. So we'll have to stop. We'll come back to that here in a minute too. But switching out to the V2 camera, which was put in place as well for those episodes for 15 and 16, we start to see more of those views. So we can start mixing those in here as well. Episode 16 from the V1 from the east side, now from the V2 from the volcano house side, showing the difference. Like in this case, south vent shooting much higher than north vent there. And there's some of that pistoning, the north vent, south vent active in 17 as well. Not reaching those greater heights, but leading to that big flood of lava. Here's when with that ponded area in the center there in the foreground here, perch pond that we've seen overturning and collapsing, all throughout the many months of this phase here. So that's the summit cameras there. And let me find the, here we are, the crater cameras. I'll play that one for you guys. So B1 to start. There is that back vent complex in the southwest corner of the crater. Most of these initial flows are not reaching very far across the crater, but as time goes on, you start seeing more of the oozing and not only ooze up flows, but lava ramping and actually reaching here from traversing over the surface as well. But clearly still a lot of ooze up flows during this early phase. We won't see quite as many of those now in this later phase that we're in now towards the end. So the B1 camera is one of the only ones that's been online the entire eruption here, which is really fascinating. So this one is one we'll see a lot as we move through this progress here. That was a nice breakout there on the east side of the crater. But you really can see back to back each fountain and filling and the pattern here of 10 months all accelerated into some more reasonable time frame to try to understand the whole thing as a whole. So B2 camera, from that point of view, a little closer to the action here. You see some rain clouds come through, the steam starts baking the camera a little bit. We start wondering, oh, that flow is right, looks like underneath the camera right here, isn't it? And so far so good. Flows are keep coming across, spreading out across the whole caldera. There you see a little bit of the swelling of injection of lava from underground underneath this surface layer. Some more right there. I see that bulging. And that's how we get the ooze up flows with lava injected below, eventually pushing out of cracks further over. By 11, we start seeing, okay, some of these big floods are hugging the southern crater wall and really seeing big flows just underneath this camera. Others hug the north wall, working their way around towards the east side of the crater, a little bit further and further each time. We are at episode 13. Double fountains. 14. It stays close to start with this precursor activity. Flows moving across the center. But here come our bigger fountains. 15 was the one that started impacting some of the gear over near the crater rim up in that area. But it was really these next couple, 16, flow comes across the north, starts wrapping, but makes this big barrier, which then, when the next flow comes across, seems to funnel this flow and allows this later magma and flow to come much closer here to the camera. So we'll see in the next, right after this, the second act, that camera is not going to last much longer. But now we'll switch back to the KW camera. So reverse angle here and seeing this outflow from the vents in the southeast, or sorry, the bottom right part of the image here. It's actually the southwest part of the crater. And the flow is sneaking around, sometimes sneaking around to the north, sometimes sneaking around to the south, but marching further and further and thickening this western part more so, but starting to lap and make this big ramp down towards the east as well. So I think it's pretty fascinating to see the flows one after the other, overturning sequences, how they repeat themselves here, and I have some thoughts to release these time lapses as their own sequences later on, maybe with some music without me talking over them, so you can see them all without me breaking up into these patterns as we're doing right now, because even that is quite interesting. So 14, Some rain comes through, precursor activity from 14. We're starting to build to our first high fountain peaks. Precursory once again, and here comes 15, and that actually knocks out our KW camera. And so it freezes at 15. We can't go further than that in this episode. It's also true of our thermal camera, the F1 that's right next to it, but we'll once again pull ourselves through to 15 here and show you guys without that daytime nighttime view how that thermal signature looks, where you can much more easily see these ooze up flows in the back end, nothing connecting them to the main flows here in the foreground. So whether it's injecting underneath there or just putting pressure on that already in place flow that has liquid on the interior and forcing it out one way or the other, manifesting that ooze of activity, which was much more common here in this second act. There is 15 and an F1 camera shutting off for us finally. All right, so moving on to our third act. This is 18 to 28. I don't know if you can see this quite so well. 28 is what this says over here. Let's make it visual in case anyone else needs it there. That's when we have another reset, that reset between of that low fountain of 17, and a recovery of the pattern back to our second high fountains that seem to be more persistent there. So the vents, here's a S2. You see that burst coming up where we've reestablished after 17 or high fountain in 18. Didn't last so long though. And we're having briefer episodes or having more precursor activity, which I've put in here, leading to these higher fountains. 20, 21, 22. You can see the massive amount of vent, and as I mentioned before, you see usually one fountain higher than the other, one more dominant than the other, at least over the longer term of the episode, of each episode. So 25, more precursor activity. 26, you see that big burst from the north. For 25, I should say. And again in 26, similar pattern. We're starting to really see this accumulation of material from this camera here on this southwest side of the crater, and all this flow of material that is occurring as this whole area is filled in. So let's switch over to the V1 camera, which is one of the ones many of us watch live when the eruptions are ongoing, and so this is all sped up here. V1, V2, V3, looking at each episode one at a time. So that was 18 with the low fountains, lower fountains, 19 getting higher, but you see much more of this precursor activity in this phase here. Gas coming out pretty constantly all the time. You know, when lava's coming out or not, we see gas. It's just more gas, less gas, more gas, less gas. And bursts of lava with, it seems like more precursor activity. So maybe there's more of that degas lava needs to be pushed out of the way in the vent, you know, being remobilized into that vent. So it takes more pressure to build up. And so that's changing the patterns over time as well. And we're up to 21, which these cameras are all catching because they're not the ones knocked out, right? So this V1 was our main camera. We didn't have KW anymore after 15 for a while, for about 3 months. So and then we have V3 coming online as well during this period, which is hard to remember now. Before we had the V3 camera, it's so interesting and useful. So during this later phase of the second act, we have 3 points of view running live, but we've lost our thermal camera and our wide angle view from the west. Pretty fascinating. More changes in the vents. You see that pattern I've mentioned in the past, that the fountains seem to be dominated by the shapes of the vents at times. Sometimes we have these big V-shaped fountains with fairly wide bases that fan out towards the top. Sometimes the base of the fountain is pretty skinny, and that makes it shoot up higher. But those peaks of high fountains don't last the entire episode. They seem to peak early and then downshift, or, you know, gear down, as you see here in 25. But it's enough during those initial bursts to send lava and pile lava up on this back rim, where we start seeing a growing pile of tephra up on the crater rim on the southwest side. There's our V3. Our fountains are still shooting straight up here, right? And they're episodic, lots of material accumulating, flowing days and days after the fountain is shut off here. And 26 here from V1 to start. That material still flowing in the background. V2, north vent dominant there. V3, once again. Really incredible changes to the landscape on a day-to-day basis here. There's 27. This is the last one of this series here. And look at that, all that dark material in the air. I saw that tephra cooling in midair and getting blown and landing elsewhere. And sometimes as far as a highway, we start seeing the reports of this during this act as well here. There's 28. Look at all the material going long after the fountain is shut off. Interesting changes in fountain shapes once again. V2, the material flowing, and V3 will be our last one here. So really, yeah, you know, geology is usually a science of imagination, I like to say. You have to imagine all the changes happening, mountains eroding to sand, sand hardening to rock. But here, the rate of change is just incredible, just incredible. So backing out to the crater view. Am I in the right spot here? Yeah, okay, yeah, there we are. B1 camera. And you start seeing these flows marching further and further to the east, right? We still, at this early part of this act, still have a good chunk of old crater floor uncovered still. We could still see bits of these vents still in there. The camera did have some issues with connectivity. We were losing some nighttime views, and we missed some parts of some eruptions in there. But overall, it was our best camera. The B2 only lasted one episode before it got melted in episode 18 here, not big flow. So moving on to the KW camera, which came back online for episode 27 and 28, just like the F1 camera here you saw at the end, those two coming back online, showing those last couple of bursts there. So that is our third act, and to finish the grouping here, at least as I would currently do it, Act 4, episodes 29 to 35. When we see the vent changes, here's a nicely inclined fountain. In this hybrid pattern of different vent shapes, but increasing volumes and rates and escalation to our third and now record high fountains of this eruption. So from the S2 camera, here's 29 through 35. You see these bursts are getting shorter. The pauses are longer in between, but then bursts are shorter, like not lasting forever. And here comes our inclined fountain, getting a little less inclined. Still one vent dominant in this early phase through 33, which has its own precursory activity. There's a north vent burst. And then 34 is where we see this major change, where it's not just the one vent bursting with that big volume, it's both of them at the same time. But that makes eruption not last quite as long either. And here's 35, precursor buildup. And once again, double burst, double vents coming out once again. And something starts affecting the camera view of that one as well. Okay, so the V1, that point of view, V1, V2, V3, here's episode 29. From rotating around, V1 is like looking from the north, V2 is looking from the east, and V2 is looking kind of from the south, or like working our way clockwise around the crater with these views for each episode. From Volcano House, this was usually the view. This is obviously zoomed in, but most of the public would see the V2 view when they're not online looking at the live streams here. The precursor activity seems to lengthen. There seems to be a lot, it seems to go on for many, many hours. There is our inclined fountain once again for 31. For 32, we had those whirlwinds coming through at that point in time as well. Material is still flying up against the edges here, but we're actually growing the size of this mound. That's this vent complex in the southwest part with all this tephra piling up, not just against the crater wall, but further east of the vents as well. As you see here landing, and you see tephra cinder spatter pile up all the way out to down in here, right to the edge of this perch pond that we're seeing in the central western part of the crater here. As time goes on, the fountains become a little less inclined, 33, 34, where we start bursting them upwards in that massive double outpouring there, 34 and 35. Most recent one here from a couple of weeks ago. So that is our summit cameras. And we'll look at the crater filling for this later phase. And yeah, there it is, lava coming all the way to this eastern edge and starting to unlap and cover up what was left of this uncovered ground from 2023. And each flow now is pretty reliably marching all the way across the crater. We're not seeing as much as this ooze-up action, really none of it at all. More the secondary crustal overturning of these big flows upon this area. Because even though the fountains are happening for less duration, they're putting out larger and larger amounts of lava each time. And that means thicker flows, bigger ponding areas, and more areas to be overturning. So working our way, there's 32. Look at how much we're bypassing some of the central high area and feeding lava all the way to this eastern side of the crater over here. And there is that initial precursory 33. And then here comes the big burst. And daytime views is not as easy to see. Sometimes the flow doesn't come quite as far. Here were two branches that hug north and south, didn't quite make it across. 34 comes a little further. 35 comes a little further. And that's about the pattern we're seeing of filling and covering the crater floor. So reverse angle, KW camera. It looks like we fill the whole crater from this point of view, right? But that far big flow we saw is all this area right through here from this point of view. And you see much more of this initial burst. When the first burst comes out, it fans this entire western area before it establishes more, or has more established channels that carry lava further to the east there. See this channel system, flow front all the way over there now, and occasional pulses where you see bursts of the channel and secondary overflows from there as well. So that big first fan, and then there's a channel established, one north, one south, reaching all the way around. This was the one we referred to as a lay, fully encircling the crater and missing the high spots in the middle. You see big chunks of this cone complex getting carried away and moved elsewhere. Look, this stuff's ending up all the way over here from the cone. This is how we build this big high area in this western part of the crater around this event complex. Here's 34, precursory, big burst, all the way to the far side. And the flow moving and lasting much longer than the actual brief fountains, brief double fountains, both in 34 and in 35, right? And precursor activity becoming extended and also reaching flows across the crater floor. Not quite as far, but enough to help with this whole ramp that's building up here. And here comes the main burst. Initial outburst with the fan, and then establishing a central flow marching across the crater to the east there. Thermal view. And this is where we saw our ooze-up flows earlier. We don't really see any ooze-up action. The view is slightly different here in both the KW and F1 cameras because the cameras were moved following their being knocked offline. And so slightly different perspective, but you really can see the same pattern in a more even or more consistent color scale, we'll call it here, even if it is in thermal. So secondary movement, and then that final collapse we saw following 35 here in that perch pond area. So that is all the cameras time lapse. We've pieced them together and grouped them by phases here to kind of show you from start to finish, just S1 camera, just event growth. We're giving guys an update of this process here, the vents growing, through those bursts of lava. You see growing and slumping. Now we start growing this whole side over here. Look at all this material on this side of the frame. And when we start having this inclined fountains, we start growing more over here on this side as well. And that's how it looks for the vent area all the way through. And through this whole time, the crater is filling. Here's a long-term filling graph. Each eruption puts out another step in this graph until the laser is also knocked offline by that episode 15 fountain. We have the USGS map showing the thickness asymmetrically greater on the southwestern side, but still in a range of 30 to 60 feet on the eastern side. And this is early on in episode 34 when it put out this map. So maybe 2/3 of the way through here. And we have this cross section down here in the corner showing how this yellow line at the top is the gap between yellow and that orange below it is the thickness of lava filled in by our eruption thus far since December 2024. And so there you see what I'm referring to, this big ramp that goes down towards the east here, thicker in the west. And while lava keeps flowing from that area all the way across the crater to unlap and eventually try to cover all this area over here, which is where we are now. Right. So one other way to look at this is the maps that we have put up at the USGS. This is the very first one from December showing that full extent of lava covering the crater. Here is that September 2023 remnant with the cones that have been buried there. So a little animation of this one as well. What you can kind of see is the edges marching up the contours here as the crater is filling up, and the growth of this orange area, which is the actual spatter and higher mound, the vent complex as we're calling it, right? More of a tephra cone or tephra and spatter cone shield all through here. And not only do you see it rising at the crater walls, filling in these little nooks and crannies, you actually see in here movement onto this little down drop block. That's a little sliver here on this northwest side. But on this eastern side of a gentler slope, as you see the contours spread further apart, you see this onlapping, almost like the tide rising onto the beach here, and the lava coming and rising and drowning out these mounds and onlapping and nearly covering all of this 2023 flow over here. This little segment came up on the crater wall and dribbled down, so that'll probably last a little while. But on the floor to this contour right here, it's almost all gone, as you can see through September as our most recent map provided by the USGS. And that's the map sequence. So let's look at all the sequences thermally. There's a, oh, did I not quite? Okay, there we go. From the start, first burst, second one, pretty fast through all episodes from the thermal camera. So you can maybe see it all in sequence. Ooze it flows early on, not so much later on. Remember, we're going to have a gap here from 15 to 27, but we do see that burst and continued filling of the crater through each pulse and flood of lava marching its way across there. That's the F1. Here is the KW camera, similar exercise, just going quickly. This is basically one image at either 11 o'clock or noon each day, just showing how that crater has been filling over time, right? And that's not quite through 35, but through 34 in that case. Here is the B2 for as long as it lasted. Its full sequence, one image per day until it goes offline in episode 18 there. B1 camera, similar exercise. You see lava onlapping this hot in map view. Here you actually can see it moving across with each pulse of lava each day that goes by coming towards the east. And that takes us through episode 34. So here's a version of B1 camera, once again, from the beginning all the way through episode 35. The drowning of those cones from September, onlapping almost all the way to the east side of the crater. And that is the filling of the crater there. So I'll stop there with the patterns, and I'll pass to you guys for your take on how this all looks over the past 10 months.
It's crazy because, as we talked about previously, that nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, from the USGS to Don Swanson to crackpot YouTube channels thought that we would get 1,000-foot fountains weekly, bi-weekly for a year, basically. That was not on anybody's card. And then here we are. It's just crazy that seems like it's in weird state of equilibrium almost.
And Don probably came the closest. Don for many years talked about, look at all this reticulite on the edge of the crater. The only way to get this is have a high fountain that's more than 400 meters, because this is a frozen froth, have this much pumice, and look at how thick it's 1 meter thick here in the edge. How do you think this got here? Look at how much is in volcano golf course underneath people's houses. Like, you dig in the dirt there, you can find that much pumice. Fountains landing stuff all the way over there. So he was like, he knew it happened, but that's the trick of the geologic time record. It doesn't tell you it's every week. It doesn't tell you it was 35 events and not just one big one. And so that part for, I think has been really the most unique thing we've seen here. What about you, Lou? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard all the talks too, as well on the ground. Nobody saw this forecast, and it's interesting over the hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people I've talked to over the past year, from those that are highly educated and years of experience in this, all the way to just regular viewers. Everybody keeps saying it's going to stop, and it just keeps going. It's absolutely remarkable. And watching the instruments, and as much as I do, I keep looking for it to stop, but it's just an absolute amazing sight to see it. Just here it comes again. 5 more days, 4 more days, week after week, and a lot of talk of, well, they're spreading out. That's taking longer. Well, in geologic terms, right, it's pretty darn fast. And the 16 days, even though I think we had one episode that was 17, and had to go all the way back to episode 3 that had the 21 day. I mean, it's just nonstop. So, pretty remarkable.
So that comment I made about Lou making the jelly donut, he actually did it, and we don't have any questions. We did have a couple shout outs I'd like to do just real quick here. We had Linda come through on the website with a $95 donation. Thank you, Linda, as well as an anonymous $50 donation. I appreciate your support over there on the website, hveri.org/donate, if you are so inclined. We also do take YouTube donations as well. Appreciate all the support.
And Claudia Adams came in with $10 on the donation site as well. Last week, cool. She just came in late. Thank you, Claudia.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thanks to everybody that donated. Thanks to everybody that tuned in today. I don't know how I feel about these things that Lou created, but
you brought it up, so here we go. It's Halloween. I have a Halloween version for us. So,
all right. Well, we can see on screen the real version, and now we're going to change it to Lou's AI donut.
The jelly donut.
I don't think it understood the jelly donut metaphor.
Yeah, right. There's no, it's just a piling of them out, right? So, so it goes back to 2018 when we talked about, the like stepping on one or something like that, right?
There's my Halloween version.
Don't worry, it gets worse.
What do you mean it doesn't get worse? It gets better.
All the way up to the Skittles on the caldera rim. Look at that. Thank you, Lou, for your
happy Halloween.
Yeah. All right, back to the real.
There's another one in there. There's there's one good one in there.
You'd be disappointed if I don't show the powder.
You have to show the good one. There it is. The powdered jelly donut.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Never again.
I have to work. If I'm not using this analogy, I'm gonna have to work on this and go into the AI myself to actually try to get it to show what I'm really talking about, right?
Right. Because it looks like Lou just photoshopped a donut onto the thing and then animated that.
Yep.
If I had to guess.
Exactly what I did. Fast and easy.
All right. Well, thank you guys. And where's that live view? Do we still have that on? Oh, we've got the time lapse going. That'll work. Yeah. So, unless something unexpected happens, I think that gets us through everything, and we don't have any questions today. I did have one question for you, actually, Lou. Who is Boulder Bob?
Who's Boulder Bob?
I assume that was from your community.
Boulder Bob?
I
have no idea.
Bob the Boulder? He's ring a bell?
That's new to me. Maybe in the witness
chat,
protection program.
It's got to be his Discord.
I don't know. We'll have to take a look. Yeah, if anybody's watching cams tonight, the north vent is really putting on a glow, and maybe even some flames starting to show.
So, good.
Throw that on it. Show you guys. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. We're on spatter watch in the next 24 hours, so might not be long.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, even if it does take a week to have a full onset, we've seen many days of precursor activity ahead of the episode, right? So that is certainly in the next week something to expect. Spatter building up to even precursory flows that could last a day or several days ahead of the actual rigorous onset. So that is what's ahead of us in the next week. And so mahalo everybody for your support as always, your interest, for spreading our content, liking, sharing, subscribing, all that. Anything you guys want to add before we sign off here, gentlemen?
No. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
That's it for me.
So from our nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, for Luatori, Dane DuPont, I'm Philip Ong. Till next week, aloha everyone.